What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 189 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barov, and well, that was about as unexpected and shocking of a performance from St. John's that I've ever seen, as they completely dropped the ball, figuratively, of course, because they certainly didn't do it literally in the hoop on Wednesday night, falling to UConn 72 to 40. Yes, you heard that right. The number 15 ranked St. John's Red Storm only scored 40 points in a full basketball game. Even in Rick Pitino's worst nightmare, I don't think what happened in Hartford could have been conjured, as St. John's finished the game not making a basket for over 17 minutes. It was a night of unfortunate, historically bad stats, Jeopardy like trivia factoids that made the Red Storm look like a joke to the media at large, and the UConn fans and Big East fans who were frothing at the mouth, waiting to see the 13-game winning streak snapped. Well, it snapped like a twig when St. John's was held to just two made baskets in the second half. It snapped like when Bane broke Batman's back over his knee, thanks to the Johnnies missing their last 24 shot attempts. If we didn't see it happen with our own eyes, I would say it was simply unbelievable. Two gentlemen who were there and witnessed this anemic offense firsthand join me today. It's Roger Rubin of Newsday, Kevin Connelly of StormThePaint.com, and new contributor to Sports Illustrated via On SI to cover college basketball in its entirety. Guys, how are you doing? And any idea if St. John's made a field goal yet?
Well, no. But listen,
No,
I know
no, they
I know
haven't.
you're gonna get to this at the end of the podcast, but I just want to be the first one to go on the record and say this. St. John's is going to make at least 12 field goals against Villanova. I am putting my reputation on the line. They will make 12 or more field goals against Villanova on Saturday. I just want that out there right off the bat in the show.
Way to go out on a limb,
Yeah.
buddy.
Well, listen, I mean, you could be like me and look like the dumbest guy on the planet today after I went on show after show, just, peacocking about St. John's. And I mean, I got dunked on left and right for the last, 24 hours. And I guess we could start here. Roger, the overwhelming sentiment after a game where you score 40 points was flush it, burn the tape, move on, short memory. But is that really what's best? From the lack of movement on offense, I thought the offense was incredibly stagnant, to the lack of passing. There are lessons to be learned from a loss like this, but again, I understand this idea of like, all right, just move on and be like a starting pitcher with short memory. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I understand the cliche about burning the tape, but I mean, I wouldn't burn the tape. I wouldn't really take a lot of notes on what St. John's did, but I certainly think that they can learn from the things that they saw from the University of Connecticut for a potential meeting in a tournament championship game.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think that I would burn the tape. I mean, I think that there were plenty of things that, were concerning. I know that Coach Pitino said that, lose by 40, lose by one, it's exactly the same. I was a little concerned about the way that I saw them playing as the second half wore on. And, you know, you wonder about a loss like this. You lose a game by 10 to, a team like UConn, and, okay, fine, you had your day, they had theirs. I sort of wonder about the mental strength of the team, and I don't know really what to expect, if they're going to be back to being themselves the next game, or if there was some sort of, maybe psychological damage done by this. I'd like to think that there's not, and I know that the St. John's fans would like to think that there's not, but as I watched the second half go on, I started to see guys like hesitate to put up an open look, and that indicated to me an absence of confidence. And you hope that if you're a St. John's fan, you have to hope that that was momentary.
That's that's a little bit alarming for me to hear from you. I didn't think that we would go that far just yet. I feel like obviously the big question is how does St. John's respond on Saturday against Villanova in what should be a close to sold out crowd?
They
But
they are going to have energy to draw off. I believe that they have been a mentally tough team all season. I think that they've been poised. They've played like veterans. I don't necessarily think that it's going to be a worst case scenario. I would expect them to bounce back and be the team that they were. I just, I wonder, you don't see a defeat like
yeah,
this very often. So you got to wonder what will be the response.
Kevin, what was your initial reactions to seeing that? I mean, obviously we've been talking since, and much like myself and many others, the big takeaway is like, how does this even possibly happen? I mean, from your eyes on press row, what were you kind of feeling watching that?
Well, I think everything that I had to draw from this game has to come from the first half because, I mean, once you got under 10 minutes to go in the second half, it was nothing you were going to see could translate to an opinion. But in the first half, specifically in the first 18-0 run, um, they couldn't get an easy look. Like that, and I think that was the most alarming thing where they couldn't generate an easy look. I think the only real easy look they had was a backdoor cut from Isaiah Sellers for an easy dunk.
Yep.
He dunks it, it makes it 13-11, and like that was it. And there was a point where I was like, all right, put Ian Jackson in because Sellers couldn't drive by anybody. Hopkins couldn't drive by anybody. Zubie couldn't get around anybody. Sannon couldn't get around anybody. And I was like, if there's one thing Ian Jackson is really good at offensively, it's he could put the ball on the deck and he can get by you. And he couldn't even do that when he got in the game in the early in the first half. So the
He didn't
fact
even
that,
look like he tried to do that.
yeah, like the fact that they couldn't get even an easy look. I think that was the most alarming thing. And then you go to the second half, and the videos are out there
Yeah.
of all 424 shots they missed. And I thought they had some easy looks in that segment, and they just didn't go. So certainly what you talked about earlier, I think if you're talking about flushing it, the fan base can flush it and move on and look forward to Saturday. I know one person who's not going to flush it, and that's Rick Pitino. And to be a fly on the wall in that film session and in that practice on Thursday would be a lot of people would pay top dollar
Yeah.
to see what was going on behind those closed doors. Because I don't know how I'm sure he did. I don't know how much he really got into them Wednesday night directly after the game. I mean, there was a message, whatever it was in the post-game locker room, but I think that message probably settled in and hit home a little bit harder today at practice.
I think that uh, there's definitely messages being sent and perhaps not a lot of individual film being worked on. But I think that one of the things that Rick would harp on is that St. John's compounded their problems yesterday. They took their inability to score, and that translated to not playing good defense. That can't happen. And the lack of transition defense that we saw from St. John's was something that we really haven't seen since probably the beginning of the season. So that really took me by surprise. And it was early and often in those first like 4, 5, 6 minutes. I thought St. John's came into this game, they looked overwhelmed from the crowd perspective. They looked overwhelmed from UConn's physicality, which was a complete antithesis to the first game. And what really happened, UConn played like St. John's yesterday. UConn had, kind of that, remember Space Jam with the Monstars and they steal the powers? They kind of took St. John's identity in Hartford yesterday. And I didn't think that was really possible. And credit to them, credit to Dan Hurley, credit to Luke Murray, credit to everybody on that staff, because between them being ready for this game, being hungrier for this game, playing like it, I thought that they took it to St. John's. They kicked their ass in every single category. And that's kind of what you take away from it. It's like, well, I didn't think St. John's could have that happen to them. Well, here's your reality check. Here's you coming back down to earth a little bit, potentially. 13-game winning streak snapped. So that's where my head was at. Now, I don't think that means I heard this a lot yesterday. St. John's was due for a loss. St. John's was due to have a performance like this. No, they weren't. That's nonsense. You're never due to score 40 freaking points. You're never due to have an 0 for 24 night. That's crazy talk.
I have to say that you know what you're raising a lot of good points. The one part that I don't understand is the idea that like, oh yeah, UConn was the hungrier team. St. John's had plenty to play for.
I agree 100%.
St. John's had a lot to play for. First of all, they have talked all season about the idea of repeating as regular season champion, and that was a game that if they win it, it's a wide open pathway to do that. Okay, wide open
And Roger,
pathway to get
to
the
the
number
point,
one.
to your point, Rick Pitino's even brought that up recently, and that's what I think is important because like Rick usually doesn't even bring things up like that and look that far ahead. Rick's even brought up the chance and the possibility that we're playing to win this conference again.
Absolutely. I also think that St. John's had an opportunity here to make the kind of statement that could affect where they are positioned in the field of 68 by the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee, and possibly, although maybe a long shot, get a favorable location. I mean, I'm not saying Philadelphia, but maybe at least something in the Eastern time zone,
No,
which I know that
if they
which
it
I
would
know
have
that
been a Philadelphia,
Kevin
they're
is very
forced.
concerned because I think if St. John's ends up a 5 seed, they're going to Portland.
What
Although
about a 6?
that, I don't know, a six is a very hard second game.
Well,
A four and a five, a four and a five, they're pretty close to each other. Being a 4 or 5, you don't get the location, but you're probably just as good as the other team. A 6 and a 3 could be pretty tough.
Kevin, I mean, you're and Roger, I think that you're spot on there. I mean, the St. John's had plenty to play for, plenty. Um, this is obviously an anomaly. Like I'm seeing so many insane reactions and hot takes today, and people just killing St. John's and forgetting that they beat UConn on February 6th. Like there's a little conversations right now of people in media with big platforms who are talking about St. John's like this was a bye game. Now, yes, the score looks like it was a bye game, but like they just beat them 3 weeks ago. And everything, Kevin, like you said, when you watch that happen right before your eyes and miss after miss after miss, and a lot of like, again, not terrible looks. It was just the most awful luck possible. Like it's the definition of an anomaly of a performance. It's just so historically bad that you become a punchline because of it. I think that's foolish, and you hope that that rings true on Saturday when they respond with their hair on fire against Villanova.
Yeah, one thing I want to say is like I don't think this was an effort thing. Like they tried out there. Like in my opinion. Like they didn't just go out there and dog it and say we don't care about this game. Like there was effort. It was a worse nightmare. And one thing like I want to say and this is more of a comparison of the first half and how things kind of unfolded and unraveled. It kind of reminded me of the second half against Kentucky
Mhm.
where they couldn't get a shot off. Their best offense in that second half against Kentucky was Shannon driving and getting fouled and going to the free throw line because Kentucky is an undisciplined defense and they foul a lot. And UConn made an effort that they weren't going to foul. They were going to play really tough defense and they weren't going to foul and put St. John's on the line like they did in Madison Square Garden. So, like, specifically the first half, I thought there was a lot of parallels to the game against Kentucky. Obviously the first 4 or 5 minutes into the second half as well. And then the game went off the rails. And like I said earlier, you can't draw anything out of the final 10 minutes of the game because it was over. But that's kind of what like reflecting on it today, that's kind of what the first thing that came to my mind was like that the first 25 minutes of this game felt a lot like the last 20 minutes against Kentucky, where just everything went wrong. They couldn't get stops. They were overwhelmed in that game by Kentucky's size and maybe the crowd, and everything kind of just swept them off their feet against UConn in this second game of the season.
Kevin, you brought up the point of like at one point you wanted to just all right bring in Ian Jackson because at least he could get to the hole. Um, What about just the offense in general? Like they struggled so much just in completely in that game, but specifically in the first half. Credit to UConn. They did something yesterday which they have not done apparently not only just this season but like for years, and they're switched everything, and especially up top on the perimeter. They took away every passing lane for St. John's. They took away a lot of the cuts. They took away a lot of the space, and St. John's looked shell shocked. Like they looked unprepared for that. And I think that when Rick Pitino met with you guys for what was it, under 2 minutes or whatever, he said it's on me. I think that maybe that's what he was referring to, is that like they weren't ready, possibly. And again, this is me just thinking out loud. Maybe they weren't ready for that because they just didn't expect it. It was kind of like last year, the year before, when Rick Pitino would deploy the zone defense out of nowhere against teams, and then he played man for like 9 games, and then all of a sudden there went the zone defense. Um, that's kind of how it felt. Like St. John's looked so clueless on how to handle it, and they just couldn't get, like you said, any open looks whatsoever. They looked that was such a far cry from the type of basketball that we've seen from St. John's, and the way that they've moved all year.
I'd have to go back and really watch the tape of it. I feel like Dylan Mitchell didn't have the ball that often trying to orchestrate the offense, and that's where it worked so well for this team over the last 13 games. I mean, he did have 2 assists, which was tied for the team lead. They had 8 assists on 11 made field goals. Like that's, if you're looking for a positive, I don't know. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. Like they didn't do anything well. They didn't play offense well. They didn't like play defense. They didn't do anything well. Yeah, it was I'm at a loss for words. You don't see teams go on 17.5 minute field goal droughts and make 2 field goals over 20
Yeah.
minutes. You just don't see it. Like it's tough
At
to come up
any
with the words to try to
at
explain
any
it.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At any level.
Yeah, it's tough to come up with the words to try to describe what happened to them on this night.
St. John's was unrecognizable
Mhm.
in Hartford. Okay. If you think about the things that were their formulas for winning, and it was always little parts here and little parts here, there, but it always involved certain things like turnovers that led to transition baskets. Okay. That's been a very big part of them. And
Especially in that first win against UConn.
and UConn's ball security was excellent.
Mhm.
I think they only committed 2 turnovers maybe in the first half
Yep.
and only 5 for the game. So St. John's didn't get to do that. Also, St. John's didn't get to the free throw line the way that they normally do. That wasn't happening for them. Also, St. John's does very well when it hits the offensive glass. They do get second chance points. Last night, they didn't get very many second chance points. And they weren't able to deploy their press, which is like a catalyst for their offense, because when they only get to like do that when, UConn would be taking the ball out of the net. So after a made basket. Well, there wasn't so much of that either.
Yeah.
So, weren't able to use the press. And, in fact, Dan Hurley made a big point after the game about like, we didn't want to be taking the ball out of the net and needing to break their press. Made a big difference. There were a lot of things that St. John's did in winning 13 games, and we saw very little of any of them.
Well, one thing I'll add to that though is they did get on the offensive glass. They had 16 offensive rebounds in this game, and it translated to 6 second chance points. I mean, talk about just a horrible ratio of 16 offensive rebounds to 6 second chance points. So like they did kind of do what they normally do on the offensive glass. And typically, like, okay, something's going to stick home. Something's going to be a putback. I mean, the best time to take a 3-pointer is off an offensive rebound. And it just didn't work.
I don't know where I can't say specifically where Reed's 6 blocked shots came from, but I'm guessing some of them were when St. John's was going for a second chance point.
Well, Bryce Hopkins had his shot blocked 7 times. That's what the stats say.
Reed, and I think their defense in general deserves a lot of credit because for that reason alone. I mean, they closed everything. The airspace was Tarish Reed looked like Tim Duncan yesterday. If if he plays like that, I mean, yeah, they're going to the Final Four. Now, the thing is that the way that Tarris Reed played in this game, one, St. John's has to look at it. Like, you want to talk about what do you take from this game? Look at how you played him. It was very different than that first game. You didn't make him work at all. He got his position whenever he wanted, and he was just one move layup. It was easy. It was dunks, layups. There was no work for Tarris Reed yesterday. Zubie Ejiofor got outplayed. Bryce Hopkins got outplayed. Dylan Mitchell got outplayed. The guards got outplayed. It's top to bottom. Now, I will say this. What do you do to respond on Saturday will do a lot to flush this game away. If you can go and kick Villanova's ass on Saturday, people will be like, okay, yeah, they scored only 40 points, but you just took care of Villanova again and got the season sweep of them. But the thing is, and what you need to see on Saturday, and I said this yesterday to a few people, I want to see Rick Pitino, after that lineup gets announced on Saturday, screaming at these guys to rip Villanova's mother fluffing head off. Like, you need to respond in such a way on Saturday that it makes people forget about this. I'm not saying you need to hold Villanova to 40 points, but you need to respond the way that you looked against Creighton. There has to be a biblical proportions response, or else the conversation that is happening right now on UConn Twitter and Big East Twitter that's making fun of St. John's left and right is going to perpetuate. And don't lose this damn game on Saturday, that's for sure.
I mean, I think that all of the St. John's fans have to just hope that, what happened in Hartford is the outlier. If St. John's comes back on Saturday, feeds off the energy of a sellout crowd, and beats Villanova the way that they're probably supposed to, I think everybody will be able to sort of, the St. John's fan base will be able to relax a little bit and say, like, okay, that was the outlier game. It's out of their system. But, I mean, I think that if St. John's, there's trying hard and then there's trying too hard. I mean, trying to rip their heads off. I don't want to see St. John's getting into a bunch of foul trouble either.
You know what I mean, Roger.
Yeah.
This isn't a Duncan Powell situation.
Okay. Although, and you make a good point. There's no question that the fans of the other Big East programs, particularly the ones from Providence and particularly the ones from Connecticut, are certainly enjoying this moment.
Sure.
But the St. John's fans have been beating their chest pretty hard for the last 7 weeks.
And I will say that just means that you're kind of in a good spot, right? It means that you're the hunted instead of the hunters. Zubie Ejiofor. Hold on. Okay, go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
They still, like, I'm expecting them to respond. Like, they still have everything in front of them to play for. Like, if they win out, they're co-regular season champions at worst. They're likely still to be the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament, although they necessarily don't control that. If they win out, it's left up to Creighton and Providence. And Saturday's game, honestly, before St. John's even tips off, could determine that, because if Creighton beats Providence, Providence can't jump them in the standings anymore because Creighton only has 2 games left, including that one. So
very important.
So guys, that's
they
everybody that's
everything
asking
in front of them to play for.
Everybody that's asking, and I'm going to ask Kevin to do that one more time. Everybody that's asking about the tie-break situation in the Big East right now between St. John's and UConn, Kevin's going to lay it out for you here so that everybody hears it.
Yeah, so if St. John's and UConn both finish 18-2, which I think a lot of people expect, the first tiebreaker is your record against the next highest team in the standings. So everyone assumes Villanova is going to finish 3rd. Well, St. John's and UConn are 2-0 against them. Then it goes to the 4th place team. Say that's Seton Hall. Well, they're 2-0 against them as well. The 5th place team, say it's Creighton, or if it's DePaul, like, okay, they're both 2-0 against them. It gets down, whenever it gets down to Creighton or Providence, whoever's higher in the standings, and UConn is 1-1 against Creighton, St. John's is 2-0 against Creighton. St. John's then gets the number one seed. If Providence is ahead of Creighton in the standings, well, UConn's 2-0 against Providence. St. John's is 1-1 against Providence. UConn wins the tiebreaker, and UConn is the number one seed. So that's how it goes. If both teams win out the rest of the way, which this is under this scenario we're expecting them to do, it is whatever team is finished higher in the standings, Creighton or Providence, determines who would be the number one seed in the Big East tournament. If you're a St. John's fan, you want Creighton to finish higher. If you're a UConn fan, you want Providence to finish higher.
Yes, and good luck to you if you're rooting for the Friars. Okay.
I'm wondering about the tiebreaker to determine the tiebreaker.
Yeah, Roger wants to get into a whole nother.
What happens if Creighton and Providence end up top with the same record, and they're both, that like whichever one of them is technically ahead is the one that will determine the tiebreaker for for St. John's and UConn.
You see,
If you want to turn Mike LaPre's brain into a pretzel, give him that question.
Well, it could be. The other thing is this: the tiebreakers are all different. If three teams or four teams finish in a tie to be the team after Kevin's, DePaul, and Seton Hall.
DePaul. Yes, that's inside baseball for.
Oh, sorry.
Kevin is rooting hard for the Blue
Demons.
The Demons.
Guys, you were standing in front of Zubie Ejiofor last night. He took about 5 minutes to talk to you guys, and he said 100% it's on the players, but it starts with me. To start the game, it was as bad as I could have played on both sides of the ball. I tried to use my voice early on, but my play did not match anything I'm capable of doing. He continued to say that championship level teams respond in a positive way. My job is to make sure we are a lot more prepared for the next opponent than we were tonight. I think that's an incredibly well said response in a really tough situation. I think that is the characteristics of a leader and a captain of this team. I know the kid a little bit, and I know that he takes this very seriously and personally. And I think that for him to respond like that in that kind of a moment shows a level of maturity that is very commendable. And that kind of is what's giving me confidence on Saturday for them to respond properly, because I know he's going to take it seriously and he's going to be the one that gets into people's faces if necessary to kind of let them know that, hey, we gotta do something different, because what we did on Wednesday night certainly didn't work. And I'm just curious how you guys took Zubie's comments last night.
I thought it was as mature as a player can get in that situation. I mean, he stood in front of us for 5 minutes, busted lip and all, and answered questions and didn't run from any questions or didn't bounce around any other question. I mean, he stood there and took it on the chin, just like his team did for 40 minutes in the game. So I thought it was really mature of him. I thought it was kind of like the professional thing to do, kind of if you have hopes of being in the NBA, you're going to run into similar tough situations where you got to stand up there and answer questions after the game. And he did that. And I thought he answered all the questions really well. And again, with him as a captain and, Dylan Mitchell, who I think we're going to talk to tomorrow, and Sadiku is a captain as well. I think these guys are going to have the team ready to respond from a player perspective the right way when they play Villanova.
He is exemplary beyond the words that he said. He is exemplary because he was accountable. I don't think that he really needed to come out and talk to us. I think that he was asked and was willing to do it and stand in front of us and talk about the worst performance of the season, a performance that he even said he'd never seen anything like. I don't think that I'm not sure that there are that many guys on the team who, if they were asked hey, can you go talk to the guys about the worst performance of our season, that they would have been okay with doing that.
Well, and again, just add in the fact that our 5 minutes with him were delayed 10 minutes because he was literally with the doctors and the trainers who were tending to his bloody and cut lip. So like, yeah, like he didn't have to do it and he did it. And I thought it was all class from him to do it.
Exemplary player, exemplary character, exemplary in every way.
I found something out today, and I wonder if you guys knew about this or if this was trickling around after the game, but apparently in the handshake line, Dan Hurley and Dylan Darling and Zubie Ejiofor both said, "We're going to see you again."
Well,
That's some juice that's being added to a potential third game on March 14th.
well, those were his words. I mean, he went on ESPN last night,
Right.
and said
Is that
that's
what that was? Okay. I wasn't
yeah,
sure what the appearance was. Okay.
that's what he said. They said. We didn't know that that had happened, and I didn't notice until I got home and put the TV on and saw the interview. So like you couldn't go back and ask him. But that's what Dan Hurley said, and if you go back and listen to Dan Hurley's press conference, he was kind of basically already saying like, yeah, we're gonna see them again. It was kind of more of fait accompli from him, like, yeah, we're gonna play again in the Big East Championship, and we'll see what happens then.
That's listen. I like that. I like that moxie from Zubie and Dylan Darling, if that is accurate. I hope it is. Let's put this horrible offense and game into some context. And I talked about Jeopardy-like poor play. Here's the numbers that back it up. Oh boy. St. John's was 6 of 36 from 2-point range against UConn on Wednesday. That's the worst 2-point field goal percentage of any top 15 team in a game in the last 20 seasons. Zubie Ejiofor made a 3-pointer at the start of the second half and then a layup a minute after. St. John's would not make a field goal the rest of the half. The only remaining points would be made at the free throw line, which were 9. St. John's missed, as we know, the last 24 shots of the second half. And they went scoreless for 17-28 in the second half. The 24 straight missed field goals is the longest streak of missed field goals by an AP-ranked team in the last 8 seasons. The 24 straight missed field goals is the longest streak by any Division I team since December 29th, 2022, when the powerful Western Carolina basketball team missed 24 straight against UNC Greensboro.
I remember that game.
Yes, let's keep going. It was by far the largest defeat for the Red Storm in 3 seasons under Rick Pitino, and their fewest points scored in a game since scoring 40 against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in March of 2013.
I was there.
I was there as well. Speaking of Notre Dame, Kevin, you found something interesting about this loss and Rick Pitino's history at Louisville.
Yeah, he lost to Notre Dame by 33 points, and that was in the 08-09 season. And it was a little bit earlier in conference play, but that team wouldn't lose again until the NCAA tournament. They won the Big East tournament, and they advanced all the way to the Elite Eight before their season ended to Michigan State. So if you want some hope to cling on to, Rick Pitino lost a game by 33, which was more than what they lost by against UConn.
That's right.
And I think if you told St. John's fans they were going to win the Big East tournament and make it to the Elite Eight right now, I think everybody would sign up for that.
In blood. Hey, we call that a silver lining. We should have started the show with that to get everybody off the ledge. Kevin, that's good by you.
I got you off the ledge to start the show.
That's right.
I said they're going to make 12 or more field goals against Villanova.
That's right. But that actually brings me to a point. We're going to continue with the horrific numbers because I've got 5 more awful bullet points to get to. Roger, in regards to the bounce back, when St. John's lost against Providence, that was a pivotal moment, obviously. It was kind of the kick in the ass. St. John's team got together, had that meeting, said, we're not losing again. And then they did it 13 in a row. Now they lose in this fashion, like I mentioned, kind of coming down to earth a little bit. Could this, and again, maybe grasping at straws, maybe just looking for something to talk about, but like, could this be another wake-up call?
I thought that they were already awake.
Hmm.
So I mean, I'm not sure that wake up call is going to be the right terminology. Do I think that this could be an inflection point for them and send them in a on an arc that's upward? Of course it could. I mean, this is the kind of loss that makes everybody look inside and maybe even in the mirror and try to figure out like what their role was in it. And believe me, everyone had a role in it.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I certainly think that it could be an inflection point for them. Certainly, St. John's, the players know that that was not them. It wasn't like they didn't show up. They didn't even get on the bus in Queens.
Yeah, absolutely. St. John's
I
had.
think it's also worth mentioning that, after the Providence game, there was a important change that was made in personnel,
Mhm.
which was Dylan Mitchell was moved from being a reserve back into the starting lineup and began playing about 30 minutes a game, and it was a big difference maker for a team where, a lot of the storyline at the beginning of the year was about like they can't handle the
Right.
ball, they can't play make, and Mitchell certainly gave them that.
Well, now after this game, that's kind of back a little bit. Dylan Darling does nothing in this game. Ian Jackson did nothing in this game. I heard a handful of people now say that, well, look, one of the reasons why they struggled yesterday was because there was no point guard play. Um, I don't believe that. I'm chalking this full game up into an anomaly. Dylan Darling is just coming off a great game against Creighton. They got punked. They got punked in this game, and it's how you respond to that. Now, I don't really think we have to go individually and rip apart players, but I'll say it. Ian Jackson, not good enough. Ian Jackson is making the same mistakes on February 25th that he was making in December. There's been talks of a short leash. There's been talks about why is he getting pulled? Why is he not on the court more? He's not doing what Rick Pitino has asked him to do over and over and over again. He's been called out on it. He's been told that he's not blocking out. He's been told he's not getting rebounds. He's not guarding his man. He's giving up threes. And if you're only contributing in the points category, if you are, and you're not getting assists, and you're not have the hockey assists where you're making the right plays, you're not going to play. And there were still bad turnovers yesterday in a game like that. And I hate to single out one guy, but I'm sorry, Ian Jackson, you were the cornerstone of this transfer portal haul, and there's only been a handful of moments where he has been up to that billing. And it's getting late early. St. John's needs Ian Jackson to play like the Ian Jackson we thought was coming here, and we've only seen it a handful of times. I thought that his performance just stood out to me amongst a sea of obviously underwhelming performances.
Yeah, I mean, nobody played well. Like I'm not going to say what Ian Jackson struggles against UConn. If he plays well, the outcome's different. Like that's not the case. Like,
But I will push back because Kevin, you said it. Like, look, like they wanted to try and find a something to change up the mojo, right? Ian is the best guy off the dribble on the team. And even that, like, he didn't even look to try to kind of initiate that kind of an offense. And again, credit to UConn. Like, the switching closed everything. But, like, am I being unfair in asking a lot from Ian Jackson, who was arguably the number one transfer portal haul in the country on February 26th?
Ian Jackson, last 5 games, 6.5 points a game, which is four under what his season average is. 2.0 rebounds per game, 1.0 assists, 1.6 turnovers. He's shooting 35% from the floor. It's not good. I sort of wonder if, the way that his season has unfolded, the difficulty in changing his game from being a shooting guard to being a point guard and the all that was put on him to do that. And then the emergence of Dylan Darling is, at least the fourth best player on the team. I mean, I have to wonder if this has affected a sophomore, psychologically. It's troubling. I mean, there are a lot of troubling things.
Mhm.
I'm a little concerned that like, where did Ozzie Sellers go? Ozzie Sellers, last 10 games, shooting 24% from three-point range. This guy was a 40% three-point shooter. I know he's better than that.
Yeah,
What's happened? I don't know. I don't think that there's any one person who's to blame. I think, for this game in Hartford.
I
But
agree.
I mean, I do think that there are some concerning things around the edges. No question.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, if you're and I agree on like Jackson Sellers, they have to be better. But I mean, if you want to, not going to go player by player, but like in my opinion, St. John's best player against Connecticut was Rubin Prey. I
He-
thought I thought he actually brought some physicality, and I think that was the thing I was most surprised about was like UConn said how they had to be much more physical than St. John's after playing them the first time. They said it repeatedly. St. John's even kind of said, "Yeah, we know they're going to be more physical. Like that's still our bread and butter, and we have to bring it," and they just didn't. But I thought Ruben Prey, I thought he actually did provide at least a little bit of physicality, a little bit of resistance. I know he's still learning and growing as a player, only as a sophomore, but I just thought when he was out there, you could see some of that toughness that you had to have to win this game. But Ruben Prey can't be your toughest player on a given night if you want to win a game like this. No offense to him.
Another thing that I'm sort of wondering about, and the reason I'm wondering about it is it's less about my observations and more about Greg McDermott's words after St. John's beat Creighton. He said, people aren't guarding Dylan Mitchell anymore. They know that he's not a scorer and they're not they're not allocating a lot of resources to stopping him, but that he's a very effective player because he can beat you with rebounds and passing, and he was a great passer against Creighton.
Yep.
But I sort of wonder if that's a thing that's going on. I mean, Dylan Mitchell has had two of the last three games he scored zero.
He's also starting to take threes because there's obviously nobody guarding him, and that's not working out either.
Well, and the fact that nobody's guarding him, the other teams are putting that defender in the paint.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes he can get a running start and come right down the lane and get a layup because when he gets ahead of steam, it's very difficult to stop him. But teams are kind of putting their worst defender on him, like UConn did last night with Braylon Mullins, and they're just putting him in the paint, and that's another body where Bryce Hopkins and Zubie Ejiofor have to kind of work around. And I mean, yes, we're just talking about this one game because it's the only game St. John's has lost in the last 13 when they made the lineup switch. But it sometimes can make things difficult when there's more bodies in the paint for two guys who do most of their damage in the paint to try to score.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitchell's effort though, his effort level is really high.
Mhm.
He was really trying hard last night. He was really working it on the boards. It's not about effort. I think it's really interesting that McDermott said, I know a lot of people aren't guarding him.
Look, the fact is that St. John's picked, probably not picked because it wasn't on purpose, but St. John's picked the worst night to have their worst night against the worst possible opponent at probably almost the worst possible time. Because, like Roger said, they had a chance to basically lock up the Big East Conference. They had a chance to make a statement to the country and this NCAA seating committee where that could have probably put them strongly on that 4 seed line. Now you got talks that they dropped from the 5 to the 6 because of how bad they lost. So again, lots on the line now for St. John's as they've got to regroup against Villanova. I said I have a few more bullet points, so you're not going to let me leave without this. St. John's had their largest loss as an AP ranked team since March 15th, 1960, when they fell to St. Bonaventure by 35. Per CBS's research, St. John's 40 points on Wednesday night is the lowest or a Rick Pitino coached team that spans 1,224 games. Previous low was 43 with Boston University on December 12th, 1981 at UCLA. This is the largest margin of victory for the Huskies in any game in the entire series against St. John's. It's the worst loss personally for Rick Pitino since 2012. And how about this? Xavier and Richard Pitino earlier this season also lost to UConn by 32 in Hartford this season. And St. John's had Taris Reed go crazy on them. UConn players who have scored 20 points, 10 rebounds, 5 blocks, 3 assists in a game over the last 15 seasons, just Taris Reed. And UConn has had a hell of a lot of good big men come through that arena. So, yeah, if we're watching Jeopardy in 10, 15 years, perhaps Wednesday night's performance is going to pop up as a question one day. Just crazy. Kevin, you brought up a point actually earlier, and we're going to wrap up here because I can't believe we've been talking this long about a team that scored 40 points. Osiah Sellers got that dunk that you said that made it 13-11. Right after that, and I usually like note key moments in a game. This was it. Silas missed a 3 on the other end. Ian missed a corner 3 right after that, and it led to a dunk by Taris, a turnover right after by Hopkins, and Mullins hit that 3 in the corner, which made it 18-11. Rick calls a timeout. If Ian hits that 3, I feel like the entire game is still ongoing, and all of a sudden that moment right there ended the entire game. UConn goes and adds 13 straight points right after that, makes it 31-11, capping off a 17-2 run where the Johnnies were scoreless for 7 minutes. The game ended on that quickly, like 18-11, game's over. It's crazy how they just couldn't get into striking distance. 41-26 at halftime. You know, Roger, you and I were talking before we started. Like, you just wanted them to be like at that 10-12 mark. You just couldn't. Zubie Ejiofor starts a half with that 3 and the layup, and that's it. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. I can't believe it. 16-point halftime deficit's the biggest one that St. John's has had all season. It's one thing after another. And I thought it was really interesting. Patino in the huddle when they went into it said, you guys are panicking way too much. I don't know if you guys got to see that afterwards, but he told the guys, you guys are panicking. And I thought that was very apropos. And meanwhile, on the other side, later on, Danny Hurley's like, don't give them life here. Don't let them come back into it. Beat their ass. And it was just a very stark contrast in what was going on in the two huddles throughout the game.
We haven't seen panic much from St. John's. Haven't seen much of it. They've been poised. They've had comebacks. 15 points against Seton Hall, 16 points on the road at Xavier. I really felt like this team, its veterans, had made them a very poised group.
Yeah, listen, I have the play-by-play here, and you're looking for momentum swings. You talk about that one early. I think you also have to, and this will be my last point on the game. Go to the end of the first half, and it's 38-24, 14-point game with about a minute and a half to go, and Shannon misses the free throw for an N1, which could have made it a 13-point game. And then they come down the other end, and Taris Reed misses a layup. He gets the offensive rebound, kicks it out to Solo Ball, who makes a 3, and then puts UConn up 17. If that sequence is even flipped, where Shannon makes the free throw, it's a 13-point game, you get the defensive rebound, you come down, you score, you look up, all of a sudden it's a 11 or 10-point game. It's like, okay, we're right in this thing. But that doesn't happen. Ball hits a 3, Hopkins hits a jumper on the other end, and then Shannon's tip at the buzzer, it was ruled a basket. It really wasn't close. It was no good. And it's a 15-point game at halftime. So even if anything there switches where you don't give up that 3, Shannon makes the shot, and you're in that 13 to 10-point range at halftime, it's a little bit more palatable. But I just thought that was kind of another momentum swing that they couldn't capitalize on, and eventually led to the outcome of the game.
And if Shannon makes the free throw, now UConn's bringing the ball up against the press.
Right. And then potentially try to force another 5-second violation that St. John's
problem all season. All through the game.
You guys were there, so I have to ask because it's a talking point. Rick Pitino said we did things that we've never done, and that's something I've got to question about myself. I will question it because the team did not do things that we've done in the last 13 games. Obviously, Rick didn't go to a traditional press conference. Lots being said about that, given the moment and the situation. You guys were there. You stood in front of him. Any issue with Rick not doing full on questions? Because I kind of like I understand, but I also think that he would have been asked the same 4 or 5 questions and given very similar responses. I'm just curious what you guys, as the media, took from that situation.
We've done outside the locker room a lot of times. I think that this is people who aren't familiar with the way that St. John's operates. I mean, didn't we do, wasn't the Big Bells quote
Yes.
outside of the locker room?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that was also they were trying to get out of Cincinnati as fast as possible because we were getting a foot of snow.
us too.
Yeah. Let, what was it a big deal to me? No. Um, when we first found out that he was doing it outside the locker room and he wasn't going to come into the press room, I think I said to Roger, "Boy, this is going to be a bad look."
Yep, he
Um,
did say that, and he's right.
and it was given the game, given how they got their butts kicked. It's like go into the press room, and even if you're going to be in there for 90 seconds and give your statement, take the 2 questions and walk out. I just think that's a little bit of a better look. But I mean, personally, I didn't have that big of an issue with it. But as soon as I found that out, I said right away, boy, this is going to be a bad look.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the other thing is everybody wants to draw the comparison with Dan Hurley, who came into the interview room following St. John's win against them at the Garden. And I mean, when you're taking a look at those two things side by side, it like Kevin said, not a good look.
Yeah. UConn won the boards 41-37, points in the paint 42-12, blocks 9-4, assists 20-8, and fast break points 14-0, but no numbers matter more than 72-40 final score and 0 for 24. Simply insane. Johnny's play Villanova at 8 o'clock on Big Fox on Saturday. Gentlemen, last question. How does St. John's respond? Because that's all that matters in my opinion. That's the biggest takeaway here. What is St. John's going to do on Saturday? How do they respond? What do you want to see different? And I don't need a prediction, but like, just what do you think? What do you think we see out of them in how they come out of that locker room, Roger?
Like I said before, I wonder about how badly they are shaken from losing like this, and I'm not positive, but if I'm going to make a prediction, I think we get the St. John's team that, everybody's used to seeing, that's poised under pressure, that feeds off of a Garden crowd, and that, does its thing and does all those 4 or 5 things that I was listing, does them well again.
I think they need a fast start. I think they need to get the crowd into the game early because I'm going to assume it'll be a well lubricated crowd for an 8 o'clock game on a Saturday night. And I think they respond with a convincing victory.
I think they do too. I think that you have to. And it's going to be interesting. It's a whiteout fan, so please come to the Garden, 8 o'clock, wearing white. Do we see Rick Pitino wear the white suit? He's being advertised in the pictures of wearing a white suit, but coming off of this loss, does he maybe not do it? That's interesting, but I think we're going to see Rick in the white suit on Saturday night. We will certainly see. He's Roger Rubin, Newsday. He's Kevin Connelly, stormthepaint.com, and SINow. Check them out everywhere, always. Gentlemen, I will see you on Saturday night. Johnny Nation, I will see you on Saturday night. It's the Red Storm versus the Villanova Wildcats as St. John's looks to respond off of a historically bad night. Let's see what they can do. And all eyes will be on how Rick Pitino has his guys ready to go. Johnny Nation, thank you as always. We'll catch you next time.